The screaming alarm pierced through the humid Philippine air like a knife through silence. At Clark Air Base, what had started as a routine maintenance day in 1992 was about to become a life-or-death situation that would test the limits of human courage and skill. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos wiped the grease from her hands, her heart already racing as she recognized the emergency klaxon that meant only one thing: incoming enemy aircraft detected, and they needed every available fighter in the air now. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maria had spent the last 6 hours elbow-deep in the engine compartment of an F-16 Fighting Falcon, her hands intimately familiar with every bolt, every wire, every component that made this million-dollar war machine capable of screaming through the sky at twice the speed of sound. At 28 years old, she had been working on fighter jets for nearly a decade, starting as a rookie airman fresh out of technical school and working her way up to become one of the most skilled aircraft maintenance specialists in the entire Pacific Fleet. But knowing how to fix a fighter jet and knowing how to fly one were two completely different things. The irony wasn't lost on her. She probably understood the mechanical workings of the F-16 better than most of the pilots who flew them. Yet she had never actually been behind the controls of one in flight. Her world existed in hangars and on flight lines, not in the cockpit 30,000 feet above the earth. The base was in chaos. Intelligence had detected a formation of unidentified aircraft approaching from the north, and early radar signatures suggested they weren't friendly. In the post-Cold War era, tensions in the South China Sea were escalating, and border skirmishes had become increasingly common. What made this particular morning different was that Clark Air Base was critically short-staffed, a perfect storm of circumstances that included 3 pilots out with food poisoning, 2 more on emergency leave, and another whose aircraft had been grounded due to a hydraulic failure that Maria's team was still working to resolve. As Maria emerged from beneath the aircraft, she could see the frantic activity around her. Ground crews were scrambling to prepare the few available fighters for immediate takeoff. The base commander, Colonel James Harrison, was barking orders into his radio, his face etched with the kind of stress that comes from having more problems than solutions. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. They had 6 serviceable F-16s, but only 4 qualified pilots immediately available to fly them. Santos. The voice cut through the mechanical noise of jet engines spinning up. Maria turned to see Chief Master Sergeant Rodriguez jogging toward her, his expression grave. "How's the status on Viper 27? Maria glanced back at the aircraft. She'd been working on tail number 870257, call sign Viper 27. She had just finished replacing a faulty fuel pump and had been in the process of running final diagnostics when the alarm sounded. "She's mechanically sound, Chief. All systems green, fuel topped off, weapons loaded. She's ready to fly." "Good. Because we need her in the air in 15 minutes. Rodriguez paused, running his hand through his graying hair. "Problem is, we don't have a pilot for her." The weight of the situation was becoming clear. Maria had worked enough emergency scrambles to understand the protocol, but she'd never seen anything quite like this. The radar contacts were getting closer, and if they were hostile, the base's defensive capabilities would be severely compromised without adequate air cover. Every minute that passed increased the risk to the thousands of personnel stationed at Clark, not to mention the strategic importance of the facility itself. "Chief, what about Lieutenant Morrison from the 23rd Squadron?" "Grounded. Failed his medical recertification yesterday. Vision problems." Rodriguez shook his head. "We've got Captain Williams and Lieutenant Carter preparing for immediate takeoff. But that leaves us 2 birds short of a full defensive formation." Maria felt her stomach tighten. She had witnessed enough briefings, had worked closely enough with pilots over the years to understand what this meant. A defensive formation needed to be complete to be effective. 2 F-16s against an unknown number of potentially hostile aircraft would be suicide. But 4 aircraft working in coordinated pairs could establish air superiority and protect the base. The sound of jet engines reached a crescendo as the first 2 F-16s began their takeoff roll. Maria watched them accelerate down the runway, their afterburners creating twin columns of flame that seemed to tear the very air apart. In moments, they were airborne, climbing steeply into the morning sky, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. "There's got to be someone else," Maria said, more to herself than to Rodriguez. "What about the reserve pilots? Called in, but they're 40 minutes out minimum. The Navy's got a carrier group about 6 hours south, but their aircraft can't reach us in time." Rodriguez's radio crackled with updates from the control tower. The unknown aircraft were now less than 20 minutes from the base perimeter. It was then that Maria noticed something that would change everything. As she looked at the cockpit of Viper 27, she realized that she had been in that exact seat dozens of times during maintenance procedures. She had run engine tests, checked avionics, and performed countless other tasks that required her to be familiar with the aircraft's controls. More importantly, she had spent countless hours talking with pilots during routine maintenance, listening to their debriefings, absorbing their knowledge almost by osmosis. The thought that crossed her mind was so audacious, so unprecedented, that she almost dismissed it immediately. But as she watched the chaos around her, as she felt the weight of responsibility for her fellow service members, Maria Santos began to consider a possibility that no one else at Clark Air Base had yet imagined. What most people didn't understand about Maria Santos was that she wasn't just any mechanic. She was what the Air Force called a crew chief, a designation that carried with it responsibilities far beyond simply turning wrenches. Over her 9 years of service, she had become the kind of maintenance specialist who didn't just fix problems. She anticipated them, understood them, and most importantly, she understood the aircraft as a complete system, rather than just a collection of parts. Her journey to this moment had begun in a small town in New Mexico, where her father had run a small aircraft repair shop serving the local crop dusters and private pilots. From the age of 12, Maria had been helping him work on everything from single-engine Cessnas to vintage warbirds. Her father, a former Navy mechanic himself, had taught her that truly understanding an aircraft meant understanding how every system interconnected with every other system. "An airplane doesn't know if you're a mechanic or a pilot," he had told her countless times. "It only knows if you understand it or you don't." When Maria joined the Air Force at 19, she had brought with her an intuitive understanding of aircraft that most of her peers took years to develop. But it was her assignment to the F-16 program that had truly expanded her knowledge. The Fighting Falcon was not just a machine. It was a highly sophisticated weapon system that required its maintenance personnel to understand not just how to fix it, but how it performed its mission. Over the years, Maria had participated in countless training exercises, sitting in on pilot briefings, studying aircraft performance manuals, and most importantly, developing relationships with the pilots who flew the aircraft she maintained. She had learned about combat tactics, about the capabilities and limitations of the F-16 in various flight regimes, and about the split-second decision-making that kept pilots alive in hostile environments. "Chief," Rodriguez was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Santos, I can see those gears turning in your head. What are you thinking?" Maria took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to suggest would sound insane to anyone who didn't know her background. "Chief, I've been working on F-16s for 9 years. I've run engine tests, performed flight control checks, and sat in that cockpit hundreds of times. I've listened to enough pilot debriefings to know basic flight procedures, and I've studied the aircraft systems manuals more thoroughly than most pilots have." "What are you getting at, Santos?" "I'm saying that if you can't find a pilot for Viper 27, maybe you don't need one." Maybe you need someone who understands the aircraft systems well enough to get her airborne and into the fight. The look of shock on Rodriguez's face was exactly what Maria had expected. In the history of military aviation, there had been very few instances of non-pilots successfully flying combat aircraft, and certainly none involving female maintenance personnel taking on armed fighter jets. But Maria wasn't finished making her case. "Chief, think about it. I know the engine management systems better than anyone on this base. I understand the flight control computers, the weapon systems, the radar. I've run ground tests on every major system in this aircraft. I've been in the cockpit during engine runs, during avionics checks, during weapons systems tests. I've seen pilots start the engines, engage the systems, and prepare for takeoff hundreds of times." Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, his eyes moving between Maria and the F-16 sitting ready on the flight line. Around them, the activity was becoming more frantic as reports continued to come in about the approaching aircraft. They were now less than 15 minutes out, and the base's defensive posture was critically compromised. "Santos, do you understand what you're suggesting? Flying a fighter jet isn't like driving a car. One mistake and you're dead. Not to mention the fact that if those incoming aircraft are hostile, you'd be going into actual combat." Maria nodded grimly. "I understand the risks, Chief, but I also understand that if we don't get more aircraft in the air, we're all at risk. Those two F-16s that just took off are going to be outnumbered and outmaneuvered. They need support, and I can provide it." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Colonel Harrison, who had been monitoring the situation from the command post. His face was grim as he approached Rodriguez and Maria. "Chief, what's the status on getting more birds in the air?" Rodriguez glanced at Maria, then back at the colonel. "Sir, we've got a situation. Santos here has made a suggestion that's unconventional." As Rodriguez explained Maria's proposal, Colonel Harrison's expression shifted from disbelief to something approaching desperation. The mathematics of the situation were becoming clearer by the minute. They needed more aircraft in the air, and they needed them now. "Sergeant Santos," the colonel said, his voice carrying the weight of command, "I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you genuinely believe you can safely operate this aircraft in combat conditions?" Maria looked at the F-16, then back at the colonel. "Sir, I've been intimate with this aircraft for 9 years. I understand her systems, her capabilities, and her limitations. I've absorbed enough knowledge from pilot interactions to understand basic flight procedures and combat tactics. I won't pretend to have the training and experience of a certified pilot, but I believe I can get her airborne and into the fight." The colonel was quiet for a long moment, weighing options that no commander should ever have to consider. In the distance, the sound of jet engines reminded everyone that time was running out. "The incoming aircraft are now 12 minutes out," came the voice over Rodriguez's radio. "Base defense condition Charlie is now in effect." Colonel Harrison looked at Maria with the kind of intensity that comes from making decisions that could determine the fate of thousands of people. "Santos, if I authorize this, you understand that you'll be completely on your own up there. No instructor, no safety net, no backup." "I understand, sir." "And you understand that those aircraft approaching U.S. may be armed and hostile?" "Yes, sir." The colonel nodded slowly. "Then God help us all, because I'm about to authorize something that goes against every regulation in the book." The next 10 minutes passed in a blur of activity that would forever change Maria Santos's life. As word spread through the immediate maintenance crew about what was happening, the reaction was a mixture of shock, concern, and grudging respect. These were people who had worked alongside Maria for years, who had seen her troubleshoot complex problems that had stumped others, who had witnessed her encyclopedic knowledge of the F-16 systems. Staff Sergeant Johnson, her assistant crew chief, was the first to voice what many were thinking. "Maria, Are you absolutely sure about this? I mean, I know you know this bird inside and out, but flying it is a whole different animal. Maria was already pulling out a flight suit that had been hastily located in her approximate size. Johnson, remember 3 months ago when Lieutenant Patterson's aircraft had that intermittent flight control problem that none of the pilots could identify? Remember how I figured out it was a software conflict in the flight control computer by running simulations, understanding the system architecture? Yeah, I remember. That kind of systems knowledge doesn't just apply to troubleshooting. It applies to flying. I understand how this aircraft responds to inputs, how its systems interact with each other, how to manage power and performance parameters. Most importantly, I understand its limitations. Chief Rodriguez was coordinating with the tower and the command post, arranging for emergency clearances and establishing communication protocols. The situation was unprecedented, and everyone involved was essentially making up procedures as they went along. Colonel Harrison returned from the command post with updates that made the urgency even more apparent. The radar contacts are now showing as 6 aircraft in formation, and they're not responding to radio challenges. Our 2 F-16s are airborne and moving to intercept, but they're going to be significantly outnumbered. As Maria continued preparing for what might be the most important flight in the history of Clark Air Base, she mentally reviewed everything she knew about F-16 operations. She had observed countless pre-flight procedures, had listened to pilots discuss flight characteristics and performance parameters, and had studied aircraft operating manuals with the thoroughness of someone whose job depended on understanding every system. The F-16 was known for being a pilot's aircraft responsive, agile, and forgiving of mistakes. Its fly-by-wire flight control system was designed to prevent pilots from inadvertently exceeding the aircraft's structural limits. These characteristics, Maria hoped, would work in her favor. Santos, Colonel Harrison called out, I need you to understand something. Once you're airborne, you'll be under the operational control of Captain Williams, who's leading the intercept formation. You'll need to follow his instructions exactly, and if at any point you feel you're in over your head, you need to communicate that immediately. Understood, sir. Your call sign will be Viper 27. Your primary mission is to provide support for the intercept formation. You're not expected to engage in complex combat maneuvers, but you may need to engage targets if the situation requires it. Maria nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. Around her, the ground crew was performing final checks on the aircraft with unusual intensity. Everyone understood that this wasn't just about getting another F-16 into the air. It was about supporting someone who was taking on a challenge that no one in her position had ever attempted. As she approached the aircraft, Maria felt a strange sense of familiarity mixed with anticipation. She had climbed into this cockpit hundreds of times for maintenance procedures, but this time was different. This time, she would be closing the canopy and trusting her life to her understanding of the machine she had spent years learning to repair. The pre-flight checks went smoothly, with Maria's intimate knowledge of the aircraft systems allowing her to move through the procedures with confidence. She had memorized the startup sequence through years of observing pilots and had practiced the procedures during maintenance runs. The engines responded perfectly, the avionics systems came online without issues, and the weapons systems showed ready status. Viper 27, this is Clark Tower, came the voice in her headset. You're cleared for immediate takeoff on runway 09. Wind is light and variable, visibility unlimited. Good luck out there. Maria felt her heart racing as she taxied toward the runway. Through her radio, she could hear the communication between Captain Williams and Lieutenant Carter, who were already airborne and moving to intercept the unknown aircraft. The reports were becoming more ominous. The incoming formation was maintaining course directly toward Clark Air Base and was still not responding to radio challenges. As she lined up on the runway, Maria took a deep breath and mentally reviewed the takeoff procedure. She had watched this process countless times, had understood the physics and mechanics involved, but she had never actually performed it herself. The F-16's engine responded to her inputs exactly as she had expected, the aircraft accelerating smoothly down the runway. The moment of liftoff was unlike anything Maria had ever experienced. The aircraft became airborne with a smoothness that seemed almost surreal, and suddenly she was climbing into the Philippine sky, piloting a multi-million-dollar fighter jet with the fate of Clark Air Base potentially hanging in the balance. "Viper 27 airborne," she reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Climbing to join formation." "Roger, Viper 27, came Captain Williams's voice. "Welcome to the party. We've got 6 bogies inbound, bearing 030, approximately 8 minutes out. Form up on my left wing and prepare for intercept." As Maria maneuvered the F-16 through the sky, she realized that her years of mechanical knowledge were translating into an intuitive understanding of the aircraft's flight characteristics. The controls responded exactly as she had expected based on her understanding of the flight control systems, and the aircraft's performance parameters matched what she had studied in technical manuals. But the real test was about to begin. As the unknown aircraft continued their approach toward Clark Air Base. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Philippine sky stretched endlessly before Maria as she climbed to join the intercept formation, her F-16 responding to her inputs with a precision that both thrilled and terrified her. At 15,000 feet, she could see the 2 other American fighters ahead of her, their sleek forms cutting through the morning air with deadly purpose. Captain Williams in Viper 11 and Lieutenant Carter in Viper 12 had been airborne for nearly 10 minutes, and their fuel situation was already becoming a consideration in the tactical equation. "Viper 27, this is Viper 11. Captain Williams's voice crackled through her headset. "I need you to take position on my left wing, approximately 500 feet separation. We're going to intercept the unknown aircraft at 25,000 feet, bearing 030. Maria's hands moved across the controls with surprising confidence, her years of understanding the F-16 systems translating into an intuitive grasp of flight operations. The aircraft responded to her throttle inputs exactly as she had expected. From her knowledge of the engine management systems, and the flight controls felt natural, despite the fact that she had never actually flown the aircraft before this moment. "Roger, Viper 11, moving to position now." As she maneuvered into formation, Maria felt a strange sense of belonging, as if all those years of maintenance work had been preparing her for this exact moment. The F-16 felt like an extension of her will, responding to her commands with the precision of a finely tuned instrument. The radio chatter from Clark Air Base's command post painted an increasingly tense picture. The 6 unknown aircraft were maintaining their course directly toward the base, and electronic intelligence was suggesting they might be carrying air-to-surface weapons. If they were hostile and managed to reach the base, the damage could be catastrophic. "All Viper aircraft, this is Clark Control," came the voice of the air traffic controller. "Bogey formation is now 5 minutes out, altitude 22,000 feet, speed approximately 400 knots. You are cleared to intercept and identify. Rules of engagement are in effect. You are authorized to fire if fired upon." Maria felt her stomach tighten at the mention of rules of engagement. She had studied weapon systems as part of her maintenance training, understood the mechanics of how the F-16's cannon and missiles functioned, but the thought of actually using them in combat was something entirely different. She forced herself to focus on the immediate task, maintaining formation and supporting her fellow pilots. As the 3 F-16s climbed toward the intercept point, Maria's radio crackled with updates from the early warning radar operators. The unknown aircraft were now identified as 6 fighters of unknown origin, flying in a tight formation that suggested military training. Their radar signatures were consistent with modern fighter aircraft, and their flight path indicated they were definitely targeting Clark Air Base. Viper Flight, this is Clark Control. You have 6 bogies at your 12 o'clock, 20 miles, level at 25,000 feet. Intercept and identify. Captain Williams's voice came through with the calm professionalism that Maria had always admired in the pilots she had worked with. Roger, Clark Control. Viper Flight has visual contact. 6 aircraft information appear to be fighter-type aircraft. Moving to intercept. Maria strained her eyes against the morning sun and spotted them 6 dark shapes against the blue sky, flying in a formation that immediately told her they were military aircraft. Her heart began racing as she realized that this was no longer a training exercise or a routine intercept. These were potentially hostile aircraft approaching a major American military installation, and she was about to become part of the first line of defense. The next few minutes unfolded with the kind of precision that comes from years of training and preparation. Captain Williams led the formation into an intercept course that would allow them to identify the unknown aircraft while maintaining a tactical advantage. Maria found herself naturally falling into the formation, her understanding of the F-16's performance characteristics allowing her to anticipate the aircraft's behavior and maintain proper positioning. Unknown aircraft, unknown aircraft. This is United States Air Force Flight Viper 11. Captain Williams transmitted on the International Emergency Frequency. You are approaching restricted United States airspace. Identify yourself immediately and state your intentions. The response was silence. The 6 aircraft continued their approach toward Clark Air Base, showing no indication that they had received or acknowledged the radio challenge. Maria could feel the tension building in the formation as it became increasingly clear that these were not friendly aircraft making a navigation error. Viper 11, this is Clark Control. Unknown aircraft are not responding to radio challenges and are maintaining course toward the base. You are authorized to close for visual identification. As the American formation moved closer to the unknown aircraft, Maria got her first clear look at what they were facing. The aircraft were sleek, modern fighters with swept wings and twin engines, definitely military hardware, and definitely not anything that should be approaching Clark Air Base unannounced. Their markings were not immediately recognizable, but their aggressive formation and failure to respond to radio challenges left little doubt about their intentions. Clark Control. This is Viper 11. I have visual identification of 6 fighter aircraft, type unknown, bearing hostile markings. They are not responding to radio challenges and are maintaining course toward the base. Request instructions. The response from Clark Control carried the weight of a decision that no one wanted to make. Viper 11, you are authorized to take defensive action. Repeat, you are authorized to take defensive action to protect the base. Maria felt her training and her understanding of the aircraft systems merge into a single focused purpose. The F-16's weapon systems were armed and ready. The radar was locked onto the lead aircraft of the hostile formation, and her finger was resting on the weapons release button. But she also understood that what happened in the next few moments would determine not just the fate of Clark Air Base, but potentially the course of international relations in the region. Viper Flight. This is Viper 11. Break formation and engage on my command. Viper 27. Stay with me and follow my lead. As the hostile aircraft continued their approach, Maria realized that her years of mechanical knowledge were about to be tested in the most extreme way possible. She understood the F-16's capabilities, its weapon systems, and its performance limitations, but she was about to discover whether that knowledge could translate into survival in actual combat. The moment of truth was approaching, and Maria Santos, who had started the day as just a mechanic, was about to become something that no one including herself, could have imagined. The transformation from maintenance specialist to combat pilot happened in the space of a heartbeat. As the hostile aircraft broke formation and began what was clearly an attack run on Clark Air Base, Maria Santos found herself in the middle of aerial combat that would test every ounce of knowledge she had accumulated over 9 years of working on fighter jets. Viper flight, bandits are going hot. Defensive maneuvers now. Captain Williams's voice cut through the radio with urgent intensity as the lead hostile aircraft launched what appeared to be an air-to-air missile at the American formation. Maria's response was instinctive, drawing on hundreds of conversations with pilots about defensive tactics and her intimate understanding of the F-16's flight envelope. She pulled the aircraft into a sharp left turn while simultaneously deploying chaff and flares, countermeasures designed to confuse incoming missiles. The F-16 responded to her inputs with the agility that had made it legendary among fighter pilots, and Maria felt the G-forces pressing her into her seat as the aircraft maneuvered through the sky. The missile passed harmlessly behind her, its guidance system fooled by the electronic countermeasures, but Maria knew this was just the beginning. The sky around her had suddenly become a three-dimensional battlefield, where split-second decisions meant the difference between life and death. Viper 27, good defensive move. Captain Williams's voice carried both surprise and approval. Stay with me and watch your 6 o'clock. We've got bandits coming around for another pass. Maria's understanding of the F-16's radar and weapon systems proved invaluable as she worked to maintain situational awareness in the chaotic aerial environment. The aircraft's heads-up display showed her the positions of both friendly and hostile aircraft, and she used this information to position herself for maximum effectiveness while avoiding becoming a target herself. Viper 11, this is Viper 27. I have a hostile aircraft bearing 270, approximately 3 miles. Closing fast, Maria reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Roger, 27. I see him. You're cleared to engage if you have a clean shot. The moment that Maria had hoped would never come was suddenly upon her. The hostile aircraft was maneuvering into a position where it could threaten both her and Captain Williams, and her understanding of aerial tactics told her that she needed to act quickly. Her finger found the weapons release button, and she felt the familiar weight of responsibility that she had carried as a maintenance specialist. Except now, instead of ensuring that an aircraft was ready to fly, she was using that aircraft to defend her fellow service members. The AIM-9 Sidewinder missile launched from her aircraft with a sound that Maria had heard countless times during weapons testing, but never in actual combat. The missile's infrared seeker locked onto the heat signature of the hostile aircraft's engines, and Maria watched as it streaked across the sky toward its target. The explosion that followed was both spectacular and sobering. The hostile aircraft disintegrated in a ball of fire and debris, and Maria realized that she had just achieved something that would have been unimaginable. When she woke up that morning, she had successfully engaged and destroyed an enemy aircraft in aerial combat. Viper 27, good kill, that's 1 bandit down. Captain Williams's voice carried both relief and renewed focus. But we've still got 5 more, and they're regrouping for another attack. The next few minutes unfolded with the kind of intensity that pushes human beings to their absolute limits. Maria found herself maneuvering through the sky, using her knowledge of the F-16's performance capabilities to stay ahead of enemy missiles while positioning herself to support her fellow pilots. Her understanding of the aircraft systems allowed her to manage fuel consumption, monitor engine parameters, and maintain weapons readiness, while simultaneously engaging in combat maneuvers that would have challenged experienced fighter pilots. Lieutenant Carter's voice crackled through the radio with urgent concern. Viper 11, I'm taking fire. Multiple bandits on my 6. Maria looked in Carter's direction and saw 2 hostile aircraft pursuing the young pilot's F-16. their position suggesting they were about to achieve a firing solution. Without hesitation, she maneuvered her aircraft into a position where she could engage the trailing hostile aircraft. Viper 1-2, this is Viper 2-7. I'm coming to your assist. Break left on my mark. Her second missile engagement was even more precise than the first. Using her understanding of the F-16's fire control radar and the AIM-12 RAM missile's capabilities, Maria achieved a lock-on and fired at maximum effective range. The missile tracked perfectly, intercepting the hostile aircraft before it could fire on Lieutenant Carter. 2-7, that's another excellent kill. Carter's voice carried gratitude and disbelief. I don't know who you are, but you just saved my life. The aerial battle continued for another 10 minutes, with Maria proving that her mechanical knowledge could translate into effective combat performance. She destroyed a third hostile aircraft and assisted in the destruction of a fourth, while Captain Williams and Lieutenant Carter accounted for the remaining two. When the last hostile aircraft fell from the sky, the three American F-16s found themselves alone in the Philippine sky, having successfully defended Clark Air Base against an attack that could have been catastrophic. Clark Control, this is Viper 1-1, all bandits destroyed. The base is secure. The response from the control tower carried relief and amazement. Roger, Viper 1-1. Outstanding work out there. All Viper aircraft are cleared to return to base. As Maria turned her F-16 toward Clark Air Base, she realized that she had just accomplished something unprecedented in military aviation history. She had gone from being a maintenance specialist to a combat pilot in the space of a single morning, and she had not only survived but had proven herself to be remarkably effective in aerial combat. But the most challenging part of her day was still ahead of her. Landing the F-16 safely and dealing with the aftermath of what had just occurred, the adrenaline that had carried Maria through the aerial engagement was beginning to fade as she approached Clark Air Base for what would arguably be the most challenging part of her entire experience, landing an F-16 Fighting Falcon. While she had successfully taken off and engaged in combat, landing a fighter jet required a level of precision and timing that left no room for error. Viper 2-7, this is Clark Tower. You're cleared for straight-in approach to runway 09. Wind is calm, visibility unlimited. Take your time and remember that we have emergency equipment standing by. The mention of emergency equipment was both reassuring and sobering. Maria understood that while her takeoff and combat performance had been successful, landing was statistically the most dangerous phase of fighter jet operations. She had watched countless pilots land F-16s, had studied the aircraft's landing characteristics as part of her maintenance training, but she had never actually performed the procedure herself. As she configured the aircraft for landing, Maria's intimate knowledge of the F-16 systems proved invaluable. She understood the relationship between airspeed, angle of attack, and landing gear configuration better than most pilots, having studied these parameters extensively during her maintenance career. The aircraft's fly-by-wire flight control system would help prevent her from making catastrophic errors, but the final approach and touchdown required skills that could only come from experience and training. Viper 1-1, this is Viper 2-7. I'm going to need some coaching on this approach. I understand the theory, but I've never actually landed one of these before. Captain Williams's voice came through with the calm professionalism that had characterized his performance throughout the engagement. Roger, 2-7. I'm going to fly formation with you on the approach and talk you through it step by step. You've done amazing work today, and we're going to get you down safely. The approach to Clark Air Base's runway took on an almost surreal quality as Maria found herself flying in formation with Captain Williams while he provided real-time instruction on landing procedures. Her understanding of the aircraft systems allowed her to anticipate how the F-16 would respond to configuration changes and she found that her mechanical knowledge translated surprisingly well into flight operations. 27. You're looking good. Reduce power slightly and maintain your glide path. Remember that the F-16 has a tendency to float if you carry too much speed, so be prepared to adjust your approach. Maria's hands moved across the controls with increasing confidence as she managed the aircraft's energy state during the approach. Her knowledge of the F-16's engine characteristics allowed her to make smooth power adjustments, while her understanding of the flight control systems helped her maintain precise control of the aircraft's attitude and speed. The runway at Clark Air Base grew larger in her windscreen as she descended on final approach, and Maria felt a strange mixture of concentration and calm. The aircraft was responding exactly as she had expected, based on her years of studying its performance characteristics, and Captain Williams's coaching was helping her translate that knowledge into practical flying skills. Viper 27, you're on speed and on glide path. You're doing great. Just maintain what you're doing and prepare for touchdown. The moment of touchdown was both terrifying and exhilarating. Maria felt the main landing gear contact the runway with a firmness that indicated a successful landing, followed immediately by the nose gear settling onto the concrete. The F-16 speed brakes and wheel brakes responded to her inputs exactly as she had expected, and she brought the aircraft to a smooth stop on the runway. Viper 27, welcome back to Clark Air Base. That was an outstanding landing. As Maria taxied the F-16 back to the flight line, she could see that word of what had happened had spread throughout the base. Ground crews, maintenance personnel, and pilots were gathering around the aircraft parking area, their faces showing a mixture of amazement, respect, and curiosity about the woman who had just accomplished something unprecedented in military aviation. Colonel Harrison was waiting for her as she shut down the engines and opened the canopy. His expression was one of someone who had just witnessed something that challenged every assumption about military aviation and combat operations. Sergeant Santos, I need to debrief you on what just happened out there, but first I want to say that your performance today was nothing short of extraordinary. You not only successfully operated an F-16 in combat conditions, but you proved yourself to be remarkably effective in aerial combat. As Maria climbed down from the cockpit, she was surrounded by her fellow maintenance personnel, pilots, and base personnel who had witnessed her transformation from mechanic to combat pilot. The questions came fast and furious. How did she know how to fly? What was it like in combat? How did she manage to achieve 3 confirmed kills in her first aerial engagement? Chief Rodriguez approached her with an expression of pride and amazement. Santos, in 30 years of military service, I've never seen anything like what you accomplished today. You didn't just fly that aircraft, you excelled in conditions that would have challenged experienced combat pilots. But even as Maria accepted the congratulations and praise from her fellow service members, she understood that what had happened that morning would have implications far beyond Clark Air Base. She had proven that extensive mechanical knowledge, combined with intelligence, courage, and determination, could translate into effective combat performance. More importantly, she had demonstrated that the artificial barriers between different military specialties might not be as absolute as everyone had believed. The debriefing that followed would be extensive and detailed, involving not just base personnel but investigators from higher headquarters who needed to understand exactly how a maintenance specialist had successfully engaged in aerial combat. But for now, Maria Santos was simply grateful to be back on the ground, having successfully completed a mission that had started with a routine maintenance day and had ended with her becoming an unlikely hero. The story of what happened at Clark Air Base that morning would spread throughout the military aviation community, challenging assumptions about training, capability, and the artificial boundaries between different military specialties. Maria Santos had proven that sometimes the person best qualified to fly the aircraft is the one who understands it most intimately, even if that person happens to be just a mechanic. Within hours of Maria's successful landing at Clark Air Base, word of what had transpired began spreading through military channels like wildfire. What had started as a routine morning at a Philippine air base had evolved into something that would challenge fundamental assumptions about military training, combat readiness, and the artificial boundaries that had traditionally separated different aviation specialties. The debriefing room at Clark Air Base had never seen anything quite like the gathering that assembled that afternoon. Colonel Harrison sat at the head of a conference table surrounded by intelligence officers, flight safety investigators, combat analysts, and senior military officials who had been hastily summoned from throughout the Pacific Theater. At the coffee center of it all sat Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, still wearing her flight suit, facing questions about an experience that defied conventional military wisdom. "Sergeant Santos," began Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Davis, the chief flight safety investigator who had flown in from Yokota Air Base in Japan, "I need you to walk us through your decision-making process during the engagement. Specifically, how did you determine target priorities and manage weapons employment without formal fighter pilot training?" Maria took a deep breath, understanding that her answers would be scrutinized not just for their tactical relevance, but for their implications regarding military training and doctrine. "Ma'am, my weapons employment decisions were based on my understanding of the F-16's radar and missile systems, combined with tactical principles I had absorbed from years of working with pilots and listening to combat debriefings," she continued. "When I engaged the first hostile aircraft, I used my knowledge of the AIM-9 Sidewinder's infrared seeker capabilities and the F-16's fire control system to achieve a lock-on. The target was maneuvering in a way that presented a clear heat signature, and my understanding of the missile's engagement envelope told me it was a high-probability shot." Major James Mitchell, a combat veteran with over 2,000 hours in the F-16, leaned forward with obvious interest. "Sergeant, what you're describing suggests a level of systems integration knowledge that most pilots don't achieve until they've been flying operationally for several years. How did you acquire this knowledge through maintenance work?" "Sir, when you're responsible for maintaining weapon systems, you don't just learn how to replace components, you learn how those components function as part of the larger system. I've run countless weapon systems tests, analyzed performance data, and troubleshot integration problems. Over 9 years, that kind of work gives you an intimate understanding of how everything works together." The questions continued for hours, covering every aspect of Maria's performance from her initial takeoff through the final landing. What emerged was a picture of someone who had essentially received an unconventional but highly effective education in fighter aircraft operations through her maintenance responsibilities. Captain Williams, who had led the formation during the engagement, provided crucial testimony about Maria's performance. "What impressed me most wasn't just her technical competence, it was her situational awareness and tactical decision-making. She anticipated threats, positioned herself effectively, and made split-second decisions that protected both herself and other aircraft in the formation." Lieutenant Carter added his perspective. "When Sergeant Santos moved to assist me during the engagement, her timing and positioning were perfect. She understood not just how to employ weapons, but how to coordinate with other aircraft in a complex tactical environment. That's not something you can learn from books. It requires an intuitive understanding of aerial combat." The investigation expanded beyond the immediate tactical questions to examine the broader implications of what had occurred. Defense officials from Washington were asking fundamental questions about pilot training requirements, the potential for cross-training between specialties, and whether the military was adequately utilizing the expertise of its technical personnel. Colonel Harrison addressed one of the most significant concerns. "The question we're all grappling with is whether what happened here represents a unique individual achievement, or whether it suggests that we need to reconsider our assumptions about who can effectively operate combat aircraft." Maria found herself at the center of discussions that extended far beyond her individual experience. Military analysts were examining whether extensive mechanical knowledge could serve as a foundation for accelerated pilot training, whether maintenance personnel should receive basic flight training as part of their technical education, and whether the rigid separation between operational and maintenance roles was serving the military's best interests. Dr. Sarah Chen, a defense analyst who had been brought in to assess the psychological aspects of Maria's performance, posed questions that went to the heart of military training philosophy. Sergeant Santos, during the engagement, did you experience the kind of sensory overload or decision paralysis that often affects pilots in their first combat experience? No, ma'am. I think my maintenance background actually helped with that. When you're troubleshooting a complex system failure under time pressure, you learn to compartmentalize information and focus on the most critical factors. The combat environment felt similar, lots of information coming in simultaneously, but I was able to prioritize and respond based on my understanding of the systems and the tactical situation. The implications of Maria's answer were not lost on the assembled investigators. Traditional pilot training assumed that combat effectiveness required extensive flight experience and gradual exposure to increasingly complex scenarios. Maria had demonstrated that deep systems knowledge, combined with the right psychological attributes, could potentially accelerate that learning curve dramatically. As the day-long debriefing continued, it became clear that Maria's experience would trigger a comprehensive review of military aviation training and personnel policies. Her success had proven that the boundaries between different aviation specialties might be more permeable than anyone had imagined. Investigation also revealed something that would become crucial to understanding the broader significance of Maria's achievement. She was not unique in her level of systems knowledge. Throughout the Air Force, there were maintenance specialists who possessed similarly deep understanding of aircraft operations, but who had never been given the opportunity to apply that knowledge in an operational context. General Robert Hayes, the Pacific Air Force's commander who had flown in from Hawaii specifically to investigate the incident, summarized the significance of what had occurred. What Sergeant Santos accomplished today doesn't just represent individual heroism. It represents a fundamental challenge to how we think about human resources in military aviation. We may be sitting on a vast reservoir of untapped potential. As the formal investigation continued, word of Maria's achievement began spreading beyond military circles, attracting attention from aviation experts, defense analysts, and media organizations around the world. The story of a female mechanic who had successfully flown a fighter jet in combat was unprecedented, and its implications for military aviation would be debated for years to come. Within 48 hours of the engagement at Clark Air Base, Maria Santos found herself at the center of a media phenomenon that would transform her from an unknown maintenance specialist into one of the most famous figures in modern military aviation. The story of a female mechanic who had successfully piloted an F-16 in combat captured the imagination of people around the world, challenging preconceptions about gender roles, military training, and the nature of expertise itself. The first reports appeared in military publications and aviation magazines, but the story quickly spread to mainstream media outlets as journalists recognized its broader significance. Television networks, newspapers, and online publications competed to tell the story of the woman who had redefined what was possible in military aviation. Good evening, I'm Sarah Johnson with CNN. Tonight, we have an exclusive report about an extraordinary story from the Philippines, where a U.S. Air Force maintenance specialist successfully flew a fighter jet in combat, achieving multiple confirmed kills and helping to defend Clark Air Base against hostile aircraft. This unprecedented achievement is raising fundamental questions about military training and the untapped potential within our armed forces. The media coverage focused not just on the immediate drama of Maria's combat success, but on the broader implications of her achievement. Aviation experts appeared on news programs to discuss what her experience meant for pilot training, while feminist organizations highlighted her story as an example of women excelling in traditionally male-dominated fields. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a professor of aerospace engineering at MIT, provided context during a live television interview. What Sergeant Santos accomplished is remarkable not just because she successfully operated a complex aircraft system, but because she demonstrated that deep technical knowledge can translate into operational effectiveness in ways that we're only beginning to understand. The military's response to the media attention was carefully calibrated. While officials wanted to recognize Maria's heroism and exceptional performance, they also needed to avoid suggesting that the incident represented a failure of normal procedures, or that unqualified personnel had been placed in dangerous situations. General Hayes addressed the media during a press conference at the Pentagon. Sergeant Santos's performance during the Clark Air Base incident represents the highest traditions of military service: courage, competence, and selfless dedication to protecting her fellow service members. Her success demonstrates the exceptional quality of our Air Force personnel and the effectiveness of our technical training programs. The recognition came quickly and from multiple sources. Within a week of the incident, Maria received the Distinguished Flying Cross, making her one of the few non-pilots ever to receive the decoration. The citation read, "For extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight as pilot of an F-16 aircraft during combat operations against hostile forces. Sergeant Santos's exceptional flying skills, courage under fire, and dedication to mission accomplishment resulted in the destruction of 3 enemy aircraft and the successful defense of Clark Air Base." The Air Force Cross followed, recognizing her extraordinary heroism in combat. The Secretary of the Air Force personally presented the decoration during a ceremony at the Pentagon, with Maria's parents, who had flown in from New Mexico, watching with pride and amazement as their daughter received one of the military's highest honors. When Maria was growing up, helping me work on crop dusters and small aircraft, I never imagined that she would one day be flying fighter jets in combat. Her father, Ricardo Santos, told reporters. But I'm not surprised that she succeeded. Maria has always understood aircraft better than anyone I've ever known, and she's never backed down from a challenge. The international response was equally significant. Aviation organizations around the world invited Maria to speak at conferences and symposiums, eager to understand how her experience might apply to their own training and operational procedures. The International Society of Women Airline Pilots offered her honorary membership, recognizing her achievement as a breakthrough for women in aviation. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from her fellow service members. Pilots throughout the Air Force began requesting Maria's assistance with aircraft maintenance issues, recognizing that her unique combination of technical knowledge and operational experience gave her insights that traditional specialists in either field might lack. Captain Williams, who had led the formation during the engagement, became one of Maria's strongest advocates. "Flying with Sergeant Santos taught me that expertise comes in many forms." Her understanding of the F-16 was so comprehensive that she was able to translate that knowledge into effective combat performance almost instantly. That's not just remarkable, it's revolutionary. The story also sparked important conversations about gender equality in military aviation. While women had been flying combat aircraft in the U.S. military since the 1990s, Maria's achievement represented something different, a demonstration that expertise and capability could emerge from unexpected backgrounds and circumstances. Colonel Lisa Anderson, one of the first female F-16 pilots in the Air Force, provided perspective during a symposium on women in military aviation. Maria's story is important not just because she succeeded in combat, but because she succeeded by bringing a unique perspective to fighter operations. Her maintenance background gave her insights that traditional pilot training might not provide. The media attention also brought scrutiny to the broader question of how the military identified and developed talent. Defense analysts began asking whether the armed forces were adequately recognizing the potential of personnel and technical specialties, and whether artificial barriers between different career fields were preventing optimal utilization of human resources. Maria herself handled the media attention with the same calm professionalism she had demonstrated in combat. During interviews, she consistently emphasized that her achievement was built on the contributions of countless other people: the pilots who had shared their knowledge, the instructors who had trained her in aircraft systems, and the fellow maintenance specialists who had supported her throughout her career. "I didn't accomplish this alone," she told reporters during a press conference at Clark Air Base. "Everything I was able to do in that cockpit was built on 9 years of learning from other people pilots, instructors, fellow mechanics, and everyone else who contributed to my understanding of the F-16. This was a team effort, even though I was the one in the cockpit." Her humility and grace under pressure only added to the respect and admiration she received from military and civilian audiences alike, cementing her status as not just a military hero, but as a symbol of what was possible when talent, training, and opportunity intersected in unexpected ways. The ripple effects of Maria Santos's extraordinary achievement at Clark Air Base extended far beyond the immediate recognition and media attention. Her success in flying an F-16 in combat without formal pilot training triggered a comprehensive reevaluation of military aviation policies, training programs, and personnel utilization that would influence military aviation for decades to come. Within 6 months of the incident, the Air Force had established the Advanced Technical Cross-Training Program, designed to identify maintenance specialists with exceptional systems knowledge and provide them with basic flight training. Maria served as the program's first advisor, helping to develop curricula that would bridge the gap between technical expertise and operational application. "What we learned from Sergeant Santos's experience," explained Colonel Martinez, the program's director, "is that deep systems knowledge can serve as a foundation for accelerated flight training. We're not trying to replace traditional pilot training, but we are exploring whether we can expand our pool of qualified aviators by recognizing different pathways to competence." The program initially selected 50 maintenance specialists from across the Air Force, all of whom demonstrated exceptional knowledge of aircraft systems and strong performance under pressure. The results were remarkable. Participants completed basic flight training in roughly 60% of the time typically required, and their systems knowledge gave them advantages in aircraft management and emergency procedures that surprised experienced instructors. Maria's influence extended beyond training programs to operational policies. The Pentagon established new guidelines for emergency situations that formally recognized the potential for qualified maintenance personnel to operate aircraft when no trained pilots were available. While such situations were expected to remain extremely rare, the new policies provided commanders with additional options during crisis scenarios. The international aviation community took notice as well. NATO allies began examining their own policies regarding cross-training between technical and operational specialties, while several countries invited Maria to consult on their military aviation programs. Her experience became a case study taught in military academies and aviation schools around the world. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a military historian at the Naval War College, placed Maria's achievement in historical context. Throughout aviation history, we've seen examples of individuals who challenged conventional wisdom about who could fly aircraft and under what circumstances. But Sergeant Santos's experience is unique because it demonstrates how modern aircraft systems knowledge can translate into operational capability in ways that weren't possible with earlier generations of aircraft. The broader implications of Maria's success reached into civilian aviation as well. Major airlines began recruiting maintenance specialists for pilot training programs, recognizing that their technical backgrounds could provide advantages in modern commercial aviation. Several aerospace companies established internship programs designed to give maintenance personnel exposure to flight operations, creating new career pathways that hadn't existed before. Maria herself continued to serve in the Air Force, but her role evolved significantly. She was promoted to technical sergeant and assigned to the Air Force Test Center at Edwards Air Base, where she became part of a team responsible for evaluating new aircraft systems and providing input on design requirements from a maintenance perspective. Having someone with Maria's unique background on our team has been invaluable, said Major Thompson, a test pilot at Edwards. She understands aircraft systems from both a technical and operational perspective, which gives her insights that none of the rest of us have. She's helping us design aircraft that will be easier to maintain and more effective to operate. The changes went beyond individual programs and policies to influence broader military culture. Maria's achievement became a symbol of the importance of recognizing expertise wherever it existed, regardless of traditional career boundaries. Military leaders began encouraging more interaction between operational and technical personnel, fostering an environment where knowledge could be shared more freely across specialties. General Hayes, who had overseen the initial investigation, reflected on the lasting significance of Maria's achievement during a speech at the Air Force Academy. Sergeant Santos taught us that excellence doesn't always follow predictable paths. Sometimes the person best qualified to accomplish a mission is the one who understands the tools and systems most intimately, rather than the one who has followed the traditional training pathway. The impact on women in military aviation was particularly significant. Maria's success provided inspiration for countless young women considering military careers, demonstrating that expertise and determination could overcome traditional barriers. Applications from women for both pilot and maintenance training programs increased substantially in the years following her achievement. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, one of the women inspired by Maria's story, explained her decision to pursue military aviation. Seeing what Sergeant Santos accomplished showed me that there are many ways to contribute to military aviation. Her story convinced me that if I worked hard to understand aircraft systems and develop the right skills, I could find a way to make a meaningful contribution regardless of what obstacles I might face. The technological implications of Maria's experience also influenced aircraft design and development. Aerospace engineers began considering how to design aircraft systems that could be more intuitive for operators with strong technical backgrounds but limited flight experience. This led to improvements in cockpit design, automated systems, and emergency procedures that benefited all pilots. Perhaps most importantly, Maria's achievement changed how the military thought about human potential and talent development. Her success demonstrated that exceptional performance could emerge from unexpected backgrounds and circumstances, leading to more flexible approaches to personnel management and career development. The Advanced Technical Cross-Training Program that emerged from her experience eventually expanded beyond the Air Force to include Navy and Marine Corps aviation, creating new opportunities for thousands of military personnel to develop skills that transcended traditional career boundaries. 10 years after the incident at Clark Air Base, Maria's influence could be seen throughout military aviation. Training programs, operational policies, aircraft design, and military culture had all been influenced by the lessons learned from her extraordinary achievement. What had started as an emergency response to a critical situation had evolved into a fundamental shift in how the military approached talent recognition and development. Her legacy extended beyond policy changes to inspire a generation of military personnel to think differently about their own potential and the artificial limits that society often imposed on individual achievement. 20 years after that extraordinary morning at Clark Air Base, the name Maria Santos had become synonymous with innovation, courage, and the breaking of barriers in military aviation. What began as an emergency response to a critical situation had evolved into a fundamental transformation of how the military approached training, talent recognition, and the intersection of technical expertise with operational capability. Colonel Maria Santos, she had eventually completed formal pilot training and risen through the ranks, stood before a group of young airmen at the newly established Santos Center for Advanced Aviation Training at Nellis Air Force Base. The facility, named in her honor, represented the culmination of 2 decades of evolution in military aviation training philosophy. When I climbed into that F-16 cockpit 20 years ago, she told the assembled trainees, I never imagined that I was starting a conversation that would still be ongoing today. What I've learned in the years since is that breaking barriers isn't just about individual achievement. It's about opening doors for everyone who comes after you. The Santos Center had become the premier facility for cross-training programs that brought together personnel from different aviation specialties. Pilots learned from maintenance specialists about aircraft systems, while technical personnel gained understanding of operational requirements. The result was a new generation of aviation professionals who understood their aircraft and missions from multiple perspectives. Major Lisa Rodriguez, one of the center's instructors and a graduate of the original Advanced Technical Cross-Training program, explained the philosophy that guided the facility. We've learned that the artificial boundaries between different aviation specialties often prevented us from optimizing performance. By breaking down those barriers and encouraging cross-pollination of knowledge, we've created more capable and adaptable aviation professionals. The impact of Maria's achievement extended far beyond military aviation. Commercial airlines had adopted similar cross-training approaches, recognizing that pilots with strong technical backgrounds and maintenance personnel with operational understanding created safer and more efficient operations. Several major aerospace companies had established programs that encouraged engineers to gain flight experience and pilots to deepen their technical knowledge. Dr. Michael Chun, an aerospace engineering professor at MIT and author of The Santos Effect, How One Person Changed Aviation, provided academic perspective on the lasting impact. Maria Santos's achievement represents one of those rare moments when individual excellence creates systemic change. Her success challenged fundamental assumptions about expertise, training, and human potential that had persisted for decades. The international influence of Maria's story had continued to grow over the years. NATO had established standardized cross-training protocols based on lessons learned from her experience, while countries around the world had sent personnel to train at the Santos Center. The concept of leveraging deep technical knowledge for operational capability had become a recognized principle in military aviation globally. General Patricia Hayes, daughter of the general who had overseen the original investigation and now serving as Chief of Staff of the Air Force, reflected on the institutional changes that had resulted from Maria's achievement. 20 years ago, Sergeant Santos showed us that excellence doesn't always follow predictable paths. Today, that lesson is embedded in how we recruit, train, and develop our people. We look for potential wherever it exists, rather than limiting ourselves to traditional pathways. The personal impact on Maria herself had been equally transformative. After completing pilot training and serving in various operational roles, she had earned advanced degrees in aerospace engineering and military strategy. Her unique combination of technical knowledge, operational experience, and leadership ability had made her one of the most sought-after experts in military aviation. Her influence extended beyond the military to civilian aerospace, where she served on advisory boards for major aircraft manufacturers and contributed to the design of next-generation aircraft systems. Her insights about the relationship between human factors and system design had influenced everything from cockpit layout to maintenance procedures. Maria's greatest contribution, explained Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the military historian who had studied her impact. Wasn't just what she accomplished in that single engagement, but how she used that achievement as a platform to change an entire institution. She could have retired on her laurels, but instead she dedicated herself to ensuring that other people would have opportunities to realize their potential. The gender equality implications of Maria's achievement had also continued to resonate. Women's participation in military aviation had increased dramatically in the decades following her success, and many credited her example with inspiring them to pursue careers they might not have otherwise considered. Captain Emma Thompson, one of the first female graduates of the cross-training program, explained the inspiration Maria had provided. "Seeing what Colonel Santos accomplished showed me that being different isn't a disadvantage, it can be a strength. Her technical background gave her advantages that traditional training might not have provided, and that taught me to value my own unique perspective." As Maria concluded her address to the young airmen at the center named in her honor, she emphasized the ongoing nature of the changes she had helped initiate. What happened 20 years ago at Clark Air Base wasn't an endpoint, it was a beginning. Every person in this room has the potential to achieve something that might seem impossible today. The question isn't whether you're qualified according to traditional standards, but whether you're willing to work hard enough to become qualified according to your own standards. The legacy of that extraordinary morning in the Philippines continued to influence military aviation, inspiring new generations of aviation professionals to think differently about their own potential and the artificial limits that society often imposed on individual achievement. Maria Santos had proven that sometimes the most qualified person for a job was the one who understood it most deeply. Regardless of how they had acquired that understanding, her story remained a testament to the power of expertise, courage, and determination to overcome barriers and create possibilities that hadn't existed before. In breaking one barrier, she had opened doors for countless others, ensuring that her legacy would continue to influence military aviation for generations to come. The woman who had started as just a mechanic had become a symbol of what was possible when talent, opportunity, and courage intersected in extraordinary circumstances. To truly understand the magnitude of Maria Santos's achievement, it's essential to delve deeper into the technical complexity of what she accomplished that morning at Clark Air Base. The F-16 Fighting Falcon is not simply an aircraft. It's a sophisticated weapons system that integrates dozens of complex subsystems, each requiring precise understanding and coordination to operate effectively in combat conditions. The General Electric F-110 engine that powered Maria's aircraft generates over 29,000 pounds of thrust, capable of accelerating the 19,000-pound fighter to speeds exceeding Mach 2. Managing this engine requires understanding not just basic throttle inputs, but complex relationships between fuel flow, temperature management, and performance optimization across different flight regimes. Maria's years of engine maintenance had given her an intuitive understanding of these relationships that most pilots acquire only through extensive flight experience. "What people don't realize," explained Chief Master Sergeant Williams, who had worked alongside Maria for 3 years, "is that Maria didn't just know how to replace engine components. She understood the thermodynamic principles that governed engine performance. She could predict how the engine would respond to different inputs better than pilots with hundreds of flight hours." The F-16's fly-by-wire flight control system represents another layer of complexity that Maria had to master instantaneously. Unlike older aircraft with direct mechanical connections between pilot controls and aircraft surfaces, the F-16 interprets pilot inputs through sophisticated computers that continuously adjust control surface movements to maintain stable flight. Understanding this system requires knowledge of aerodynamics, computer programming, and aircraft stability principles that typically take months to master. During her maintenance career, Maria had worked extensively with the flight control computers, troubleshooting software conflicts, calibrating sensors, and understanding how the system processed pilot inputs. This knowledge proved crucial during the aerial engagement when she needed to push the aircraft to its performance limits while maintaining precise control. The weapon systems that Maria employed so effectively represent perhaps the most complex aspect of her achievement. The IM-9 Sidewinder and AIM-12 OMRAAM missiles are sophisticated weapons that require integration between the aircraft's radar, fire control computer, and launch systems. Successfully employing these weapons requires understanding target acquisition, engagement envelopes, and countermeasures knowledge that Maria had acquired through years of weapons systems maintenance and testing. Technical Sergeant David Park, who had worked with Maria on weapons systems integration, provided insight into her exceptional knowledge. Maria understood the missile guidance systems better than most weapons officers. She had worked on the radar integration, the fire control computers, and the launch mechanisms. She knew exactly how each weapon would perform under different conditions. The radar system that Maria used to track and engage hostile aircraft is the PG-68, a sophisticated multi-mode radar capable of air-to-air and air-to-ground operations. Operating this system effectively requires understanding signal processing, target discrimination, and electronic countermeasures, all areas where Maria's maintenance background provided crucial knowledge. During the engagement, Maria demonstrated mastery of radar modes that pilots typically spend weeks learning to operate effectively. Her understanding of the system's capabilities and limitations allowed her to maintain situational awareness in a complex tactical environment while simultaneously managing other aircraft systems. Perhaps most remarkably, Maria accomplished all of this while experiencing the physical stresses of aerial combat for the first time. G-forces during air-to-air maneuvering can exceed 6 times the force of gravity, creating physical demands that require both conditioning and technique to manage effectively. Maria's ability to maintain cognitive function and precise motor control under these conditions while simultaneously managing complex aircraft systems represents an extraordinary achievement. Dr. Robert Chun, a physiologist who studied the effects of G-forces on pilot performance, explained the significance. Most pilots require extensive training to develop the physical and mental techniques necessary to maintain performance under high G-force conditions. Maria accomplished this naturally while simultaneously learning to fly the aircraft, something that should have been physiologically impossible. The heads-up display, HUD, and multifunction displays that provided Maria with critical information during the engagement represent another technological challenge she mastered instantaneously. These systems present vast amounts of information in symbolic format that requires training to interpret quickly and accurately. Maria's maintenance background had exposed her to these displays during system testing, giving her the interpretive skills necessary to use them effectively in combat. The electronic warfare suite that protected Maria's aircraft from enemy missiles includes radar warning receivers, chaff and flare dispensers, and electronic countermeasure systems. Using these systems effectively requires understanding threat identification, countermeasure timing, and defensive maneuvering skills that Maria applied successfully during multiple missile engagements. Master Sergeant Jennifer Lopez, who had trained Maria on electronic warfare systems, recalled her exceptional aptitude. Maria understood not just how to operate the defensive systems, but why they worked. She knew the physics behind chaff and flare effectiveness, understood radar signature management, and could predict how different threats would respond to various countermeasures. The fuel management system that Maria had to monitor throughout the engagement adds another layer of complexity to her achievement. The F-16 carries approximately 7,000 pounds of fuel internally, with consumption rates that vary dramatically based on throttle settings, altitude, and maneuvering. Managing fuel effectively requires constant calculation and planning skills that Maria's maintenance background had developed through countless fuel system tests and calibrations. Navigation and communication systems represent additional technological challenges that Maria mastered during her flight. The F-16's GPS-based navigation system, secure communication radios, and identification friend or foe systems all require specific knowledge and procedures that Maria had absorbed through years of maintenance and testing work. The integration of all these systems into effective combat performance represents the true measure of Maria's achievement. Modern fighter aircraft are not simply machines that pilots operate, they are complex technological systems that require deep understanding of multiple engineering disciplines to employ effectively. Maria's maintenance background had provided her with this understanding in ways that traditional pilot training might not have achieved as quickly. The technical complexity of what Maria accomplished that morning at Clark Air Base continues to amaze aviation experts 20 years later, serving as a testament to both her exceptional knowledge and the sophisticated engineering that makes modern military aircraft possible. The international impact of Maria Santos's achievement at Clark Air Base extended far beyond American military aviation, triggering a worldwide reevaluation of training methodologies, personnel utilization, and the fundamental assumptions about military aviation expertise. Countries across 6 continents began examining their own aviation programs through the lens of what had been accomplished by a maintenance specialist who proved that expertise could transcend traditional career boundaries. The Royal Air Force was among the first international military organizations to implement changes based on lessons learned from Maria's experience. Within 18 months of the Clark Air Base incident, the RAF established the Technical Operational Integration Program, designed to identify maintenance personnel with exceptional systems knowledge and provide them with basic flight training. Wing Commander James Morrison, who directed the RAF program, explained the philosophy behind the initiative. What Sergeant Santos demonstrated was that deep technical knowledge could serve as a foundation for operational competence in ways we hadn't previously recognized. We realized we might be overlooking significant talent within our own technical ranks. The program's results exceeded all expectations. British maintenance specialists who completed the cross-training demonstrated remarkable proficiency in aircraft systems management, emergency procedures, and technical troubleshooting that surpassed traditionally trained pilots in many areas. Several participants went on to become full-time pilots, while others returned to maintenance roles with enhanced understanding of operational requirements. The French Air Force approached the challenge differently, establishing integrated training programs where maintenance and operational personnel trained together from the beginning of their careers. This approach created aviation professionals who understood both technical and operational aspects of military aviation more comprehensively than previous generations. Colonel Marie Dubois, architect of the French Integrated Training Program, described the philosophy. Rather than training pilots and mechanics separately and hoping they would communicate effectively, we decided to create aviation professionals who understood both domains. The results have been remarkable in terms of aircraft availability, mission effectiveness, and personnel satisfaction. NATO recognized the strategic implications of these developments and established the Advanced Aviation Integration Initiative, a multinational program designed to share best practices and develop standardized approaches to cross-training. The initiative became one of NATO's most successful educational programs, with personnel from 28 nations participating in exchanges and joint training exercises. General Hans Müller, the German Air Force officer who coordinated the NATO initiative, emphasized its strategic importance. What we learned from the Santos experience was that military aviation effectiveness isn't just about having the best aircraft, it's about optimizing the human factor. Countries that could better integrate technical and operational expertise would have significant advantages. The impact extended beyond Western military forces to influence aviation programs in developing nations, countries with limited resources. For separate pilot and maintenance training programs, found that integrated approaches based on the Santos model allowed them to develop more capable aviation forces with fewer resources. The Indian Air Force became a particular success story in this regard, facing challenges in maintaining adequate pilot numbers while ensuring high levels of technical expertise. They implemented comprehensive cross-training programs that produced aviation professionals capable of performing both operational and maintenance functions as needed. Air Marshal Rajesh Sharma, who oversaw the Indian program, explained its advantages. In a resource-constrained environment, having personnel who can perform multiple functions provides enormous operational flexibility. Our technical operational integration program has significantly improved our aircraft availability rates while reducing training costs. The civilian aviation industry also took notice of these military developments. Major airlines began recruiting maintenance personnel for pilot training programs, recognizing that their technical backgrounds provided advantages in modern commercial aviation. Several aerospace companies established internship programs designed to give maintenance personnel exposure to flight operations. Captain Sarah O'Brien, a former aircraft mechanic who became a commercial airline pilot through one of these programs, described the advantages her background provided. Understanding aircraft systems from a maintenance perspective made me a better pilot. I could troubleshoot problems that other pilots might not recognize, and I had a much deeper appreciation for the complexity of the systems I was operating. The technological implications of international adoption of Santos-inspired training programs influenced aircraft design and development worldwide. Aerospace manufacturers began designing aircraft systems that could be more intuitive for operators with strong technical backgrounds, leading to improvements in cockpit design, automated systems, and maintenance interfaces. Boeing's development of the FA-18 Super Hornet incorporated many design principles that emerged from studying Maria's experience. The aircraft featured enhanced diagnostic systems, more intuitive cockpit layouts, and improved integration between operational and maintenance functions. Dr. Lisa Chun, a Boeing engineer who worked on these developments, explained the design philosophy. We realized that the distinction between operators and maintainers was becoming less relevant. Modern aircraft needed to be designed for users who might have deep technical knowledge, but varying levels of operational experience. The academic world also embraced the implications of Maria's achievement. Military academies and aviation schools worldwide began offering courses that integrated technical and operational perspectives. The University of Oxford established the Santos Fellowship in Aviation Studies, bringing together researchers from around the world to study the intersection of technical expertise and operational capability. Professor Michael Thompson, who held the first Santos Fellowship, conducted groundbreaking research on learning transfer between technical and operational domains. What we discovered was that certain types of technical knowledge could accelerate operational learning far more than traditional educational theory suggested. Maria's experience provided a real-world example of principles that we're still working to understand fully. International air shows and conferences began featuring presentations about cross-training methodologies and integrated personnel development. The annual Farnborough Air Show established the Santos Innovation Award, recognizing advances in training and personnel development that broke down traditional barriers between aviation specialties. The long-term strategic implications of these changes became apparent as countries that embraced integrated training approaches demonstrated superior performance in multinational exercises and operations. NATO forces that had implemented Santos-inspired programs showed improved coordination, higher aircraft availability rates, and more effective mission accomplishment. 20 years after Clark Air Base, the international military aviation community had been fundamentally transformed by the lessons learned from Maria Santos's extraordinary achievement, creating a new paradigm for how nations developed and utilized their aviation personnel. As we reach the conclusion of Maria Santos's remarkable story, it becomes clear that her achievement at Clark Air Base represented far more than a single moment of extraordinary heroism. Her success catalyzed a fundamental transformation in how we think about human potential, expertise, and the artificial boundaries that often limit individual achievement. The ripple effects of that morning in 1992 continue to influence military and civilian aviation more than 3 decades later. Today, the Santos Institute for Advanced Aviation Studies stands as a testament to the enduring impact of her achievement. Located at the site of the former Clark Air Base, now a civilian airport, the Institute brings together researchers, educators, and aviation professionals from around the world to continue exploring the intersection of technical knowledge and operational capability that Maria first demonstrated. Dr. Patricia Williams, the Institute's current director and daughter of Captain Williams, who flew alongside Maria during the original engagement, explained the institution's mission. We exist to ensure that the lessons learned from my father's wingman that day continue to benefit future generations of aviation professionals. Maria Santos showed us that excellence can emerge from unexpected places, and we're dedicated to helping people discover and develop their own unique potential. The Institute's research has contributed to developments in artificial intelligence, human-machine interface design, and adaptive training methodologies that benefit not just aviation, but numerous other technical fields. The concept of leveraging deep domain knowledge for rapid skill acquisition has influenced everything from medical training to space exploration. NASA's Artemis program, designed to return humans to the moon, has incorporated Santos-inspired training methodologies for astronaut preparation. Mission specialists with deep technical backgrounds in spacecraft systems are being cross-trained in operational procedures, creating more versatile and capable space crews. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, NASA's Director of Astronaut Training, explained. The application. What we learned from studying Maria Santos's experience was that technical mastery could serve as a foundation for operational excellence in ways we hadn't fully appreciated. Our astronauts, who come from engineering backgrounds, are demonstrating remarkable adaptability when we provide them with operational training. The commercial space industry has also embraced these principles. Companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin actively recruit engineers for pilot training programs, recognizing that their technical backgrounds provide advantages in operating complex spacecraft systems. The automotive industry's development of autonomous vehicles has drawn heavily on research inspired by Maria's achievement. Understanding how human expertise transfers between related domains has informed the development of systems that can adapt to unexpected situations and continue operating effectively when normal procedures don't apply. Tesla's autopilot development team includes several researchers who studied the Santos case, applying lessons about adaptive expertise to create more robust autonomous driving systems. The ability to understand system behavior at a deep level while adapting to unexpected operational challenges reflects principles that Maria demonstrated during her aerial engagement. The medical field has perhaps seen some of the most significant applications of Santos-inspired research. Medical schools now commonly provide technical specialists like biomedical engineers with clinical training, while clinical practitioners receive enhanced technical education about the devices and systems they use. Dr. Jennifer Kim, a biomedical engineer who became a practicing physician through one of these integrated programs, described the advantages. Understanding medical devices from an engineering perspective makes me a better diagnostician and a more effective practitioner. When equipment behaves unexpectedly, I can often identify problems that purely clinically trained physicians might miss. The educational implications of Maria's achievement have influenced pedagogy worldwide. The concept of expertise transfer, understanding how deep knowledge in one domain can accelerate learning in related areas, has become a significant field of study in educational psychology. Universities have developed interdisciplinary programs that deliberately combine technical and operational perspectives, creating graduates who can bridge traditional disciplinary boundaries. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Santos program brings together engineering and management students to work on real-world problems that require both technical depth and operational understanding. The military continues to evolve its approach to personnel development based on lessons learned from Maria's experience. The newest generation of military aircraft is being designed with interfaces that can accommodate operators with varying backgrounds and training levels, making military aviation more accessible to personnel with diverse skill sets. The future of aviation itself is being shaped by these developments. As aircraft become increasingly automated and sophisticated, the distinction between pilots and systems operators is becoming less relevant. Future aviation professionals will need to understand both technical and operational aspects of their aircraft more comprehensively than previous generations. General Patricia Hayes, reflecting on the long-term significance of Maria's achievement during a recent symposium, offered this perspective. 30 years ago, Maria Santos showed us that the boundaries we think are fixed are often just limitations we've imposed on ourselves. Today, we're still discovering new ways to apply that lesson. The story of Maria Santos serves as a powerful reminder that human potential often exceeds our expectations, and that excellence can emerge from unexpected circumstances. Her achievement demonstrated that with sufficient knowledge, determination, and courage, individuals can accomplish things that seem impossible according to conventional wisdom. For young people considering careers in aviation, engineering, or any technical field, Maria's story provides inspiration and practical guidance. She showed that deep technical knowledge is valuable not just for its own sake, but as a foundation for broader achievement. Her success encourages us to think beyond traditional career boundaries and to recognize that expertise in one area can often transfer to related fields in surprising ways. As we look toward the future of aviation and technology, the principles that Maria Santos embodied, technical mastery, adaptive thinking, and the courage to attempt the seemingly impossible, remain as relevant today as they were that morning at Clark Air Base. Her legacy continues to influence how we develop human potential and push the boundaries of what individuals can achieve. Maria Santos began that day as just a mechanic, but she ended it as something much more, a symbol of human adaptability, a catalyst for institutional change, and an inspiration for generations of people who refuse to accept artificial limits on their potential. Her story reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary achievements come from the most unexpected circumstances, and that true expertise knows no boundaries. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.